Hi, everyone. Welcome to the Pure AI podcast, where actual human journalists bravely explore the cutting edge of artificial intelligence and then hand it off to AI to add weird pauses and pronounce neural net like it's a French cheese. I'm John Pay Waters, editor in chief of the Converge 360 group of 1105 Media. And as always, I'm joined by an editor so sharp, so ruthless, so allergic to buzzwords that ChatGPT now refers to her as the final boss. Gladys Rama. Hey Gladys, how goes the battle? Are the machines winning or are we still pretending we're in charge?
Hi, John. I spent the morning fact checking an AI generated article that claimed Alan Turing invented Bitcoin and once dated a Roomba. So I'd say we're ahead for now. So, today we're focusing on OpenAI's massive $3 billion acquisition of Windsurf, which was recently reported by Bloomberg.
This is OpenAI's largest acquisition to date, and it has far-reaching implications for the AI development ecosystem.
For listeners who might not be familiar, Windsurf was formerly known as Codium. And it's not just another code completion tool, it's a sophisticated platform specifically designed for enterprise-grade coding with features like dynamic refactoring, real-time collaboration, and optimizations for large regulated code bases.
With this acquisition, OpenAI, the company behind ChatGPT, is making a move into the code editor space, which has been dominated by Microsoft's GitHub Copilot, and which, ironically, is powered by OpenAI's own models.
This acquisition signals that the race isn't just about having the best AI models anymore. It's about controlling the entire developer experience from end to end.
And the stakes couldn't be higher. We're talking about tools that are fundamentally changing how software is built. Over the next half hour, we'll be unpacking this acquisition from multiple angles, what it means for OpenAI's strategy, how it positions them against competitors like Anthropic, and most importantly, what developers and enterprises should be thinking about as this space evolves.
And we'll also be looking at the broader implications for the AI industry and examine whether this is the beginning of a major consolidation phase as companies race to own the entire AI stack.
Stay with us as we explore OpenAI's big bet on Windsurf and what it reveals about the future of AI-driven development. Okay, so, as I said, this represents OpenAI's largest purchase to date, and I think it speaks volumes about where they see the future of AI development heading.
That's right, John. And what's particularly interesting is how strategic this move is for OpenAI's positioning in the marketplace. Windsurf isn't just a coding tool, it's a comprehensive platform that puts OpenAI right in the middle of developers' daily workflows.
Exactly. And when we look at what makes Windsurf stand out, it goes well beyond basic code completion. This is enterprise-grade technology that was built from the ground up to handle the complexities of modern software development.
The dynamic refactoring capabilities are particularly impressive. Unlike simpler AI coding tools that might just suggest the next few lines, Windsurf can understand and help restructure entire code bases. That's a significant leap forward.
And let's not forget about the real-time collaboration features. Modern software development isn't a solo activity. It's deeply collaborative, especially in enterprise environments. Windsurf recognized that from day one.
What strikes me is the attention to low latency design. When you're working with massive regulated code bases like those in healthcare or finance, you can't afford lag or performance issues. Windsurf apparently built their architecture specifically to handle these enterprise requirements.
As of this recording, OpenAI hasn't officially commented on the acquisition, but the message seems clear. They're making a decisive move to control not just the AI models that power coding assistants, but the actual interface where developers spend their time.
It's interesting to consider this in the context of OpenAI's relationship with Microsoft. GitHub Copilot has dominated this space and is deeply embedded in Microsoft's developer ecosystem. Yet it's powered by OpenAI's Codex models. This acquisition suggests OpenAI wants to chart its own course.
That's a great point. There's a certain irony in OpenAI essentially competing with a product that runs on its own technology. By acquiring Windsurf, they're establishing direct ownership over the entire stack, from the underlying AI to the developer experience.
And for enterprise clients, this could potentially offer advantages. Instead of dealing with multiple vendors and integration points, they might soon be able to work directly with OpenAI for both the models and the developer tools.
The enterprise focus is key here. Windsurf wasn't just targeting individual developers. It was built for organizations managing large teams working on complex code bases. That aligns perfectly with OpenAI's push toward enterprise customers.
I'm particularly curious about how they'll integrate Windsurf's capabilities. Will it remain a standalone product? Will it be folded into existing OpenAI offerings? Or might we see something entirely new emerge?
Those are excellent questions that many developers are asking right now. The integration approach will signal a lot about OpenAI's long term strategy in this space.
And let's not forget that Windsurf had built significant momentum on its own. Transitioning users to whatever comes next will require careful handling to avoid disrupting developer workflows that many have come to rely on.
So now we're seeing developer tools becoming the new battleground for generative AI companies. It's fascinating how quickly this has evolved.
Absolutely, John. Just a couple of years ago, we were all marveling at language models that could write coherent paragraphs. Now, these companies are fighting for control of the very tools developers use to build software.
GitHub Copilot really established this category, didn't it? Microsoft's integration of AI directly into the IDE was revolutionary, and Redmond has capitalized on its dominant position in developer tools.
The numbers back that up too. Copilot has millions of developers using it daily, and Microsoft reported earlier this year that more than 40% of newly written code in supported languages is now AI assisted through Copilot.
And remember, Copilot is powered by OpenAI's own technology. So OpenAI has essentially been watching Microsoft profit from and control the developer experience while using its models behind the scenes.
That's the key point here. OpenAI clearly isn't satisfied with just being the engine under the hood anymore. This Windsurf acquisition signals that they want to own the entire experience from top to bottom.
It's about platform control. We've seen this pattern repeatedly in tech. Whoever owns the platform where work happens gains tremendous leverage. Think about how Apple controls its app ecosystem, or how AWS shapes cloud computing.
Exactly. OpenAI appears to be making a decisive move to ensure they're not just a component in someone else's platform. They want to be the platform.
And it makes business sense. When you own the IDE or coding assistant that developers use every day, you gain incredible insights into how software is being built. That data feeds back into improving your models.
Not to mention the switching costs. Once developers get used to a particular AI coding assistant, they're less likely to change. There's a significant learning curve and workflow adjustment required.
GitHub obviously has the advantage of being deeply integrated with the most popular code repository platform in the world. That's hard to compete with directly.
But Windsurf found a way in through enterprise features that GitHub Copilot wasn't focusing on initially. They targeted regulated industries and large code bases where security, compliance, and performance are paramount.
That's a classic disruptor strategy. Find the underserved segment of the market and build specifically for their needs. And now OpenAI gets to leverage that foothold.
What's your take on whether this will accelerate competition in this space? Will we see Anthropic and other AI companies making similar moves?
I think it's inevitable. Anthropic already has relationships with Cursor and other coding tools. Google has been integrating its models into various development environments. This is quickly becoming a must have strategic position.
And beyond just the AI companies, what about the traditional IDE players? Companies like JetBrains, which makes tools like IntelliJ, or even Visual Studio from Microsoft. They're not going to sit idle while this transformation happens.
No, they definitely won't. I expect we'll see both partnerships and acquisitions accelerating across the board. The companies that control how developers write code today recognize that AI fundamentally changes that process.
And ultimately, developers themselves will decide which tools provide the most value. The battle for IDE dominance is really a battle for developer mindshare.
Let's dive deeper into OpenAI's strategy here, Gladys. This acquisition of Windsurf isn't happening in isolation. It's part of a broader vertical integration approach.
Absolutely. When we look at OpenAI's recent moves, there's a clear pattern emerging. Last year, they acquired Rockset to strengthen their back-end search and analytics capabilities. Now, with Windsurf, they're moving from infrastructure to user interface.
It's fascinating to watch this evolution. OpenAI started as a research lab focused purely on developing advanced AI models. Then they became a platform company with their API. Now they're clearly aiming to own every layer of the AI development stack.
Right, and this vertical integration strategy makes perfect business sense. When you control both the underlying models and the interfaces where those models are deployed, you can create seamless experiences that competitors can't easily match.
The Rockset acquisition was a bit under the radar for many people, but it was actually incredibly strategic. It gave OpenAI sophisticated real-time search and analytics capabilities that power many of their services behind the scenes.
And now with Windsurf, they're taking control of the developer experience itself, the actual interface where code gets written. This gives them direct access to the daily workflows of software engineers.
What's especially interesting is how this positions OpenAI against Microsoft, which is both their biggest investor and potentially their biggest competitor in this space.
It's a delicate dance they're performing. Microsoft has invested billions in OpenAI and integrates their technology across products like GitHub Copilot. But now OpenAI is essentially launching a competing product.
Right. Even though OpenAI and Microsoft maintain a collaborative relationship, their independent operations allow for strategic decisions that may lead to competition in certain areas. The acquisition of Windsurf underscores the dynamic nature of partnerships in the tech industry, where collaboration and competition often
And I think this shows how seriously OpenAI takes ownership of the entire AI stack. They're willing to potentially strain their most important partnership to ensure they're not just a component supplier in someone else's ecosystem.
and from a technical perspective, controlling the entire stack gives them huge advantages. They can optimize every layer, from model training to inference to user interface, creating efficiencies that wouldn't be possible otherwise.
The data advantage can't be overstated either. When you own the IDE, you see exactly how developers interact with AI suggestions, what they accept, what they modify, what they reject outright. That's incredibly valuable training data.
It reminds me of how Apple approaches its products, controlling both hardware and software to create that seamless experience. OpenAI seems to be applying that same philosophy to AI development tools.
And just like Apple's approach, it gives them control over the user experience. They won't have to compromise their vision to accommodate someone else's platform requirements.
Looking at the broader industry, this vertical integration trend isn't unique to OpenAI. We're seeing it across the AI landscape as companies race to secure their positions in what's clearly going to be a transformative technology. The question now is how far OpenAI will take this approach. Will they continue acquiring companies to fill out other parts of the stack, perhaps moving into specialized hardware or even more application specific tools?
Whatever their next move, one thing is clear. OpenAI is no longer content with just being the intelligence behind other companies' products. They want to own the entire experience from model to end user.
Speaking of industry reactions, I've been particularly interested in what the analysts are saying about this acquisition. Charlie Dye from Forrester had a fascinating take on this whole situation.
He did. He said something that really struck me, that OpenAI is no longer content to power GitHub Copilot from behind the curtain. That's really the crux of this, isn't it? This is OpenAI's full stack move. They want control from inference all the way to the IDE.
They want to own the entire AI assisted developer experience.
And that has significant implications for the competitive landscape. If you're Anthropic with your Claude models, for instance, this acquisition puts you in a tough spot.
Absolutely. Anthropic has been making inroads with tools like Cursor, which has been gaining serious traction lately. But now they're facing an OpenAI that's not just competing on model quality, but on the entire developer interface.
Neil Shah from Counterpoint Research made an interesting point about this. He suggested that this acquisition actually intensifies the significance of Anthropic's relationship with Anysphere, the company behind Cursor.
Right, he said, Cursor is now more than a startup. It's Anthropic's front line. That's a powerful way of putting it. These code editor partnerships are becoming strategic battlegrounds for the major AI labs.
It makes me wonder if we'll see Anthropic respond with an acquisition of their own. Maybe they'll try to fully acquire Cursor rather than just partner with them.
Or we might see them double down on specialization. If OpenAI is going broad with a full stack approach, maybe Anthropic will go deep with highly specialized developer tools for particular domains.
The other option is to form even stronger partnerships. If Anthropic can't match OpenAI's vertical integration through acquisitions, they might seek deeper integrations with existing IDE providers like JetBrains or even Microsoft's Visual Studio.
Shaw made another important point about this acquisition. He called it the holy grail of AI coding: streamlined, proactive, and modular. But he added an important caveat that it only works if developers can see what's happening under the hood.
That's such an important consideration. Developers aren't just passive consumers of technology, they want to understand the tools they're using. If OpenAI makes Windsurf too opaque, they risk losing the developer trust they've worked so hard to build.
And trust is absolutely critical in this space. Developers need to feel confident that the code suggestions they're receiving are secure, efficient, and aligned with their intent.
It's a delicate balance between automation and transparency. OpenAI needs to make Windsurf powerful enough to significantly boost productivity, but transparent enough that developers still feel in control of their code.
And then there are the developers and enterprises already using Windsurf. This acquisition raises some pretty significant questions for them, doesn't it?
It absolutely does. The most immediate concern is probably continuity. Will their existing workflows be disrupted? Will pricing structures change? These are critical considerations for teams that have already integrated Windsurf into their development pipeline.
And there's the bigger question of what happens to Windsurf as a product. Will OpenAI fold it completely into ChatGPT, or will it remain as a standalone, specialized developer tool?
That's the $1 million question, or should I say the $3 billion question. Windsurf has gained popularity precisely because it's purpose built for enterprise grade coding with features like dynamic refactoring and real time collaboration.
And it's optimized for those massive, regulated code bases that enterprises deal with. If OpenAI tries to generalize it too much, they might lose the very qualities that made it valuable in the first place.
Then there's the question of latency and performance. Windsurf is known for its low latency design, which is crucial for developer productivity. If OpenAI starts routing everything through their general purpose models, will that specialized performance be maintained?
Good point. Developer tools live and die by their responsiveness. Even a slight increase in latency can make a tool feel sluggish and frustrating to use.
I'm also wondering about IDE support. Windsurf currently works across multiple development environments. Will OpenAI maintain that broad compatibility, or will they prioritize certain platforms over others?
That's a real concern. If they start favoring specific IDEs or creating exclusive features for certain environments, it could fragment the user experience.
There's also the data privacy angle that developers need to consider. Windsurf has access to potentially sensitive code bases. How will OpenAI handle that data? Will it be used to train their models?
Those are critical questions for enterprises, especially those in regulated industries. They'll need clear answers about data governance before they can confidently continue using the tool.
I think the success of this acquisition will largely depend on how OpenAI handles the integration. If they preserve what makes Windsurf special while adding the power of their models, it could be transformative.
But if they botch the integration, they risk alienating the developer community that Windsurf has carefully built. Developers are notoriously particular about their tools, and they won't hesitate to switch if something isn't working for them.
Exactly. And there are enough alternatives in the market now that developers have options. From GitHub Copilot to Cursor to smaller specialized tools, the AI coding assistant space is getting crowded.
That's why I think OpenAI needs to be very deliberate about how they position Windsurf post acquisition. Will it be their premium developer offering? Will it target specific languages or domains? These strategic decisions will shape its future.
And ultimately, these decisions will determine whether Windsurf becomes the trusted tool that OpenAI clearly hopes it will be, or just another casualty of platform consolidation in the rapidly evolving AI landscape.
Now let's dig into the financial aspects of this deal. The $3 billion price tag for Windsurf is fascinating, not because it's particularly high in today's market, but because of what it represents.
That's right, John. What struck me is that Windsurf had reportedly been seeking this exact valuation from venture capital firms like General Catalyst and Kleiner Perkins. OpenAI essentially paid what the company was asking for, no growth premium attached.
Which tells us that this isn't about speculative future value, it's about consolidation. OpenAI is paying a premium to secure a strategic piece of the AI development stack right now, rather than letting it potentially fall into competitor hands.
And they can afford to do so. Following that massive $40 billion funding round led by SoftBank, OpenAI has the capital to make these kinds of strategic acquisitions without breaking a sweat.
That funding round really changed the game for them. With ChatGPT reportedly surpassing 400 million weekly active users, they've got both the war chest and the market momentum to make aggressive moves.
What I find particularly interesting is how this might affect OpenAI's relationship with Microsoft.
This could be OpenAI's first real attempt at charting their own course, independent of the GitHub Microsoft ecosystem. By owning their own code editor technology, they're no longer just the engine powering someone else's car. They're building their own vehicle.
That's a great analogy, and it makes you wonder if there's some tension developing in that Microsoft OpenAI partnership. Microsoft has been integrating OpenAI's technology across their product line, from Bing to Office to GitHub.
But now OpenAI seems to be saying, we want our own direct relationship with developers. That's a significant shift in strategy.
I wonder if we're seeing the early signs of OpenAI trying to reduce its dependency on Microsoft. After all, when you raise $40 billion, you're probably thinking about controlling your own destiny.
Absolutely. And this fits with a broader pattern we're seeing in the AI industry, where companies are trying to own more of the vertical stack. It's not just about having the best foundation model anymore. It's about controlling the application layer, the interfaces, and the user.
This is classic platform economics at play. The more pieces of the stack you control, the more value you can extract, and the more difficult it becomes for users to switch to.
And from a purely business perspective, it makes sense. Why let Microsoft capture most of the value from your models through GitHub Copilot when you could own that developer relationship directly?
The timing is also interesting. This comes as Microsoft is deepening its relationship with Anthropic, OpenAI's primary competitor. Perhaps OpenAI saw the writing on the wall and decided it needed to secure its own platform play.
That's a good point. Microsoft has been hedging its bets by investing in multiple AI companies. OpenAI might be doing the same by ensuring they have direct channels to market that don't depend on Microsoft's platforms.
So when we look at this $3 billion deal in context, it's not just about adding a new product to the portfolio. It's about OpenAI positioning itself as an independent platform company with control over its distribution channels.
And that might ultimately be worth far more than $3 billion if it gives OpenAI the leverage to chart its own course in the rapidly evolving AI ecosystem. Let's talk about what Windsurf really represents for OpenAI beyond just another product acquisition. This isn't just about buying a sophisticated code editor, it's about acquiring a vector into the developer workflow.
That's exactly right, John. Windsurf gives OpenAI a direct channel to shape how software gets built. It's a touchpoint that developers interact with all day, every day, generating incredibly valuable data about coding patterns, problem solving approaches, and development workflows.
And that data is gold for training future AI models. By owning the interface where code gets written, OpenAI gains insight into how developers actually work, not just the finished code that ends up in repositories.
It's a brilliant feedback loop. Developers use Windsurf, which generates data that improves OpenAI's models, which then makes Windsurf even more helpful to developers. It's the kind of virtuous cycle that tech companies dream about.
What strikes me is how the competition in AI is evolving. It's no longer just about who has the most advanced large language model. We're moving into a phase where interface ownership and user experience are becoming equally important battlegrounds.
Absolutely. Having the best model doesn't matter if you can't get it in front of users in a way that feels natural and seamless. And in the development world, that means being embedded in the IDE, the environment where developers live.
We're seeing the classic platform wars play out in real time, but with AI as the prize. Microsoft has GitHub and Visual Studio. Now, OpenAI has Windsurf. Companies like Anthropic are partnering with tools like Cursor and Anysphere. Everyone wants to own that direct relationship.
And the stakes couldn't be higher. Whoever shapes how the next generation of software gets built potentially influences the entire digital ecosystem. That's why OpenAI is willing to spend billions to secure this position.
I think there's also something to be said about the nature of these interfaces themselves. Windsurf isn't just a passive autocomplete tool, it's designed for active collaboration, refactoring, and understanding massive code bases. It's built for enterprise scale problems.
Which suggests OpenAI is thinking about the needs of large organizations, not just individual developers. They want to be the AI partner for major companies building critical software infrastructure.
What's fascinating is how this acquisition might change software development methodologies themselves. When your IDE is powered by sophisticated AI that understands both your code base and best practices, the line between junior and senior developers starts to blur.
Good point. These tools don't just make developers more productive, they fundamentally change what it means to be a software engineer. The skills that matter shift from rote coding to prompt engineering, system design, and working effectively with AI assistants.
And OpenAI now gets to help define that new paradigm. By controlling Windsurf, they can influence coding standards, architectural patterns, and even what languages and frameworks gain adoption.
It's like they're positioning themselves as the operating system for AI assisted development. Just as Windows defined how we interacted with computers for decades, tools like Windsurf might define how we build software in the AI era.
The question that remains is whether developers will embrace a world where OpenAI has this much influence over their tools and workflows. Developers have historically valued open ecosystems and interoperability.
That's where the execution of this acquisition becomes critical. If OpenAI maintains Windsurf's openness while enhancing it with their models, developers might flock to it. But if they try to lock it down too aggressively, they could face resistance.
Either way, this marks a new chapter in how AI companies are approaching the market. It's no longer enough to just build a great model. You need to own the spaces where that model creates value. As we wrap up today's episode, I think it's clear that OpenAI's $3 billion acquisition of Windsurf represents a pivotal moment in the evolution of AI development tools.
Absolutely, John. This isn't just OpenAI's largest acquisition to date, it's a statement of intent. They're no longer content with being the intelligence behind other companies' developer tools. They want to own the entire stack.
The key takeaways seem pretty clear. First, OpenAI is making a direct challenge to GitHub Copilot and Microsoft's dominance in the AI coding assistant space.
Second, this acquisition shows that the battleground in AI is shifting from model capabilities to platform control. It's about owning the interfaces where developers actually work.
Third, we're seeing OpenAI pursue vertical integration very aggressively, from the Rockset acquisition for backend infrastructure to now Windsurf for the front-end developer experience.
And finally, this move signals that OpenAI may be looking to establish more independence from Microsoft, creating its own direct relationship with developers rather than working through GitHub.
What fascinates me most is how this might reshape the developer experience. Will Windsurf retain its enterprise focus? Will it become more tightly integrated with ChatGPT? These decisions will have real implications for how software gets built.
And for competitors like Anthropic, this raises the stakes considerably. They'll need to either form stronger partnerships with remaining independent IDE tools or potentially make acquisitions of their own.
The $3 billion price tag also tells us something important, that controlling key components of the AI stack is worth paying a premium for. especially when you have the kind of capital that OpenAI has following their recent funding rounds.
In many ways, this reminds me of the early days of cloud computing, when we saw major players racing to build complete, vertically integrated offerings. The same thing is happening now with AI development tools.
And just like in cloud, we'll probably see some developers embrace these integrated stacks, while others prefer more modular, mix and match approaches.
And that's it for this week's Pure AI podcast. Be sure to check out our ongoing coverage of all things AI at pureai.com. And also check out the newest feature on Pure AI, the Converge 360 Elevator Pitch video series, which features snapshot interviews with executives who explain what their companies do for their target customers, how they use AI to solve common business problems, and how to get in touch with them if you want to learn more. Thanks, everyone. See you next time.